The smell of stale coffee and ozone always hung heavy in sub-basement 4 of the Ministry of Magic, but tonight the air tasted like ash. Ilara Vance sat alone in the center of the cartography division, her face illuminated only by the bioluminescent glow of the great map spread across the oak table. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her shift had ended 3 hours ago. But Ilara couldn't leave. She couldn't pull her eyes away from the cluster of 12 tiny, burning red dots hovering over the parchment representation of a forest in Nottinghamshire. Those dots were people. 12 Aurors, led by a veteran named Gawain Robards, and they were dying. Ilara pressed the receiver of the listen-in trumpet closer to her ear. The device, a rusted brass cone connected to the squad's communication frequency, was screaming. "Fall back! I said fall back! The shield won't hold!" That was Robards. His voice was jagged. Torn apart by the sound of exploding stone and the high-pitched whine of killing curses. "We're boxed in, sir," another voice yelled, a rookie. "The clearing is trapped. Anti-apparition wards just went up. We can't get out, and we can't break the safe-house walls. It's dragon skin reinforced stone. Our curses are just bouncing off." Ilara's hand hovered over the map. Her fingers were coated in a fine white dust. Chalk. Common, porous, fragile chalk. The kind professors used to write detention lines on a blackboard. The kind the other cartographers laughed at her for carrying. "Look at Vance," they'd snicker in the break room. "Still doodling like a first year. Can't handle a quill, love. Need some crayons." They didn't understand. They thought maps were just records of what already existed. Ilara knew they were living things. She looked at the fortress on the paper. It was drawn in heavy, permanent enchantment ink. Unmovable, just like the real walls killing the auras. She gripped the stick of white chalk in her fist until her knuckles turned white. She felt the dry, gritty texture against her palm. It felt ridiculous, a stick of limestone against a wall. But she had no wand range that could reach Nottinghamshire. She had no reinforcements to send. She only had dust. If you want to know how this forgotten witch turned a useless toy into the Ministry's most terrifying secret weapon, stay with me until the end of this story. It was 1997, the dark days before the Ministry completely fell, but the rot was already deep. Ilara was a Muggle-born Ravenclaw who had barely scraped through her newts, not because she lacked power, but because she lacked precision with standard tools. Quills tore under her hand. Inkpots exploded when she got emotional. But chalk was earth. It was grounding. It absorbed excess magic and conducted it like a copper wire. She had discovered the link a week ago, entirely by accident. She had been sketching a route update on a map of the London sewers. Bored, angry at a supervisor who had called her incompetent. She had aggressively crossed out a blocked tunnel with a thick stick of red chalk, pressing down so hard the chalk snapped. 2 hours later, a maintenance report came in.
A gas main had inexplicably ruptured in that exact tunnel, blowing the blockage clear. The report cited structural resonance. Ilara knew better. She had felt the map shudder under her hand. Back in the sub-basement, the screams from the trumpet were getting worse. "They're breaching the perimeter! Left flank!" Ilara didn't think. She didn't calculate. She acted. She leaned over the great map, her breath fogging the enchanted surface. She found the thick black line representing the eastern wall of the safe house, the wall the auras were hammering with useless blasting curses. "Resonate," she whispered. She brought the white chalk down on the paper. She didn't draw a spell. She drew a structural failure. She sketched a jagged, erratic line zigzagging right through the fortress wall's foundation. She pressed down with everything she had, grinding the chalk dust into the fibers of the map. She visualized the stone in Nottinghamshire not as solid rock, but as brittle, dry sugar. The map fought her. It was like trying to carve your name into a steel plate with a fingernail. The enchantment ink burned hot under her fingertips, rejecting the foreign edition. The map wanted to remain accurate to reality, and reality said that wall was solid. Ilara had to force the map to lie, so that reality would be forced to catch up. "Break!" she hissed, dragging the chalk down. The stick snapped in half. 300 miles away, the battlefield went silent for a heartbeat. Then, through the brass trumpet, came a sound so loud it rattled the inkwells on Ilara's desk. It was a low, groaning crunch, like the earth grinding its teeth.
"What in Merlin's name?" Robard shouted. "The wall! The rookie screamed! Look at the wall! It's shivering!" On the map, the black ink line where Ilara had drawn her chalk mark began to bleed. It blurred, losing its sharp definition. In Nottinghamshire, the dragon skin reinforced granite, immune to the strongest bombarda, suddenly developed a hairline fracture exactly matching the jagged white line on Ilara's map. The aura's stray spells hit the wall, and instead of bouncing off, the kinetic energy traveled through the chalk link, amplifying 1,000 times. The wall didn't explode. It slumped. The structural integrity simply vanished. Tons of rock turned into a landslide of gravel and dust, sliding away to reveal the stunned Death Eaters inside. "They're exposed!" Robards roared, his voice surging with sudden, confused hope. "Hit them! Now! Reductor curse, all of you!" Ilara watched the red dots surge forward. She didn't celebrate. She grabbed another piece of chalk, this time yellow. The Death Eaters were retreating into the main keep, a heavy stone tower in the center of the complex. If they got in there, they could hold out for days or reach the Flu network and escape to regroup. "Don't let them reach the tower!" Robards yelled, but the auras were slowed by the rubble. Ilara scanned the map. She saw the bridge connecting the courtyard to the tower. It was a narrow stone arch. She couldn't blow it up. The feedback might hurt the auras. She needed to make it slippery. She needed to make it treacherous. She began to shade the bridge on the map with the yellow chalk, using circular, swirling motions. She focused on the concept of friction, or rather, the lack of it.
She poured her memory of black ice, of oil slicks, of wet marble floors into the drawing. "Slippery," she muttered, sweat dripping from her nose onto the parchment. "Zero friction." The magic demanded a toll. A sharp pain spiked behind her eyes, and her nose began to bleed. Rewriting reality from a distance wasn't a spell. It was a battle of wills against the laws of physics. Through the trumpet, she heard the chaos shift. The Death Eaters running for the bridge suddenly lost their footing. It sounded like a comedy sketch in the middle of a massacre. Bodies slammed into the stone, sliding uncontrollably, crashing into the railings, piling up in a tangled heap of limbs and black robes. They couldn't stand up. They were scrabbling on the stone as if it were greased glass. "Take them down while they're prone," Robards commanded. The spellfire that followed was decisive. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts is already touching your heart and you'd like to help keep these stories alive, you can support the channel by clicking the thanks button below the video. Every little bit helps me continue bringing you more hidden tales of courage and magic. But the fight wasn't over.
The leader of the Death Eater cell, a tall wizard whose mask had fallen off, had managed to crawl across the slippery bridge and was sealing the heavy oak doors of the tower. He was going to trigger the self-destruct wards. Ilara could see the magical signature spiking on the map, a pulsing purple blooming from the center of the keep. If that tower exploded, it would take the forest, the evidence, and the 12 Aurors with it. "They're overloading the core," the rookie yelled. "We need to run." "No time," Robards yelled back. "Shields up, Maxima!" Ilara stared at the pulsing purple light. She couldn't stop an explosion with chalk. She couldn't draw a shield strong enough for them. She froze, her mind racing. What does a map do? A map defines space. A map tells you where things are. If she couldn't stop the explosion, she had to move it. This was impossible. This was suicidal. This was the kind of magic that got you through into St. Mungo's for permanent spell damage. She grabbed a thick stick of black charcoal, the heaviest, densest drawing tool she owned. She circled the pulsing purple bloom of the explosion on the map. Her hand was shaking so violently she had to grip her right wrist with her left hand to steady it. "Relocate," she gritted out through clenched teeth. She drew an arrow, a thick, heavy black arrow pointing from the tower to a deep underground cavern 2 miles to the west, a natural sinkhole marked on the topographical survey. She was trying to convince the ley lines that the explosion wasn't happening here, in the tower, but there, in the empty hole. She was trying to cut and paste a magical event. The map screamed, literally screamed, a high-pitched tear of parchment that sounded like a wounded animal. The ink bubbled and hissed. Smoke rose from the paper. The veins in Ilara's arms stood out, turning black as the magical feedback surged into her body. She felt like she was holding a lightning bolt. "Move!" she screamed at the paper. "Go there!" She dragged the charcoal across the parchment, tearing through the surface, gouging a trench into the table beneath. She forced the purple ink to follow the black charcoal line. She dragged the explosion 2 inches to the left on the map, 2 miles in reality. In Nottinghamshire, the air pressure dropped. The auras braced for the fire. The tower glowed blindingly bright. The windows blew out. And then, nothing. The light vanished. The pressure released. 2 miles away, in the middle of an empty sheep pasture, a massive column of fire erupted from the ground, vaporizing a sinkhole and sending a shock wave through the earth that knocked the sheep over harmlessly. The tower in the safe house stood silent. The Death Eater leader inside looked at his wand, confused, tapping it as if it were broken. The door to the tower was blasted off its hinges a second later by robards. The remaining Death Eaters surrendered. They had no fortress, no footing, and their final weapon had seemingly teleported away. In Sub-Basement 4, Ilara Vance collapsed. The listening trumpet was filled with the sounds of victory. Handcuffs clicking, wands being snapped, relieved laughter. "I don't know what happened," the rookie was saying, his voice shaky. "The bomb, it just skipped. It jumped." "Don't question miracles, kid," Robards grunted. "Just bag 'em and tag 'em." Ilara lay with her cheek against the cool wood of the floor. Her hands were stained black, white, and yellow. Her head felt like it had been split open with an axe. The great map was ruined, scorched, torn, and covered in chalk dust. When the ministry cleaners arrived the next morning, they found Ilara asleep under her desk. They woke her up with annoyed prods. They looked at the ruined map and tutted. "Look at this mess, Vance," the senior supervisor spat, vanishing the chalk marks with a lazy wave of his wand. "Playing with your toys again? Ruined a perfectly good topographical survey. That's coming out of your pay." Ilara didn't argue. She didn't explain. She just watched him wipe away the black arrow that had saved 12 lives. She stood up, dusted the white powder from her robes, and nodded. "Yes, sir, just a mistake. Won't happen again." But as she walked out of the room, she slipped the remaining nub of white chalk into her pocket. Her fingers brushed against it, and she felt a hum, a warm, vibrating acknowledgement from the earth itself. The official report on the Nottinghamshire raid credited Gawain Robards with exceptional tactical improvisation and noted a rare atmospheric anomaly that displaced the explosion. Ilara Vance's name appeared nowhere. She remained the girl in the back room, the one with the dusty hands and the silly drawings. But the map knew, and slowly, quietly, the war began to change. Over the next 6 months, unexplained structural failures plagued Death Eater hideouts across Britain. Bridges collapsed under snatchers. Tunnels sealed themselves shut. Wards failed at the exact moment auras arrived. And in a dark basement, a girl with a box of chalk continued to draw, quietly erasing the enemy from the face of the earth, one silly line at a time. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Ilara's place? Like the video, share it with another Harry Potter fan, and subscribe to hear more hidden stories of courage, magic,
and impossible odds. Sometimes the smallest spell is the one that saves the castle.